Dear Klaus, I've just unburdened myself to you about William Congreve's play The Way of the World, uh, a play that has been on my mind these 50 years. A wonderful, quite difficult play in the terms of the period at which Congreve wrote. And I'd like to say a few more words, particularly about Millamant, his great heroine, the great role for any actress. But also to set it in its time. We have lived in England at the point where The Way of the World was written through a tumultuous century. We had revolution. We had the Puritan Revolution. They became sick of the cynical and corrupt ways of British society, and they overthrew the administration. And when the king attempted to bring in a foreign army, that was too much, and they cut off his head. This was the signal to many people in many countries that, as it says in Forster's famous story, the machine stops. That it's possible for the machine to stop. You can stop it. You can chop off the head of the serpent. You can kill the king. So this was done, and it unleashed a terrible civil war in Britain, one of the pattern wars which continued right through another 200 years until the American conflict was resolved only in blood. And what emerged was government by the Puritans, the winning side, against the Cavaliers, the lords and ladies. And the leader of the Puritan side, Oliver Cromwell, ruled with an iron hand for some years, but when he died, his son Richard was unable to continue the succession, and out of that further tumult, in 1660, came the reinstallation of the king's son Charles, who had been in Paris all this time, having a whale of a time, luckily for us, because he brought back joy into a society in which music was forbidden, theatre was forbidden, joy itself was more or less forbidden. So back comes good King Charles, and he brings lots of ladies with him, lots of mistresses, and he brings with him an extraordinary theatrical revolution, which is the one important to us, whereby women were allowed to act on the stage. This had already been the case in the 17th century in Paris. But now it came to England, and those actors, those male actors who had become wonderful stage women, not just crudely transvestite, but exquisitely plausible and believable, and that had been their life ever since the Shakespearean theatre, which installed wonderful boys as brilliant actors, as women, and they were stuck. Suddenly, they had to become men. This was not easy. Their whole vocal register had to change. It's a drama in itself, and our director Richard Eyre in Britain has directed a wonderful theatre piece about that, or a television piece about the most famous of the men who played women. But now women were there, and the greatest of them, Mrs. Bracegirdle. Not a stage name, I think. I'm not sure you would choose that as your stage name. Mrs. Bracegirdle, who played Millamant in the original production of The Way of the World, ruled the stage. And for 40 years, between 1660 and 1700, new plays of an entirely different stamp were put on. They were rake hell plays. The heroes were rakes. The heroes scythed a path through the beautiful women of the town, and that was acceptable. It was an image of how we wanted to be. They were James Bonds of love. These heroes, they fulfilled our every fantasy. But Congreve, as I said in my previous video, was a grown-up. At least in his plays, he was a grown-up for us. And he doesn't merely produce a man in Mirabell who has swept through, although he has, in a number of cases, loved 'em and left 'em. Nevertheless, that's not the devise the standard under which he lives. And he is genuinely the lover seeking the beloved. And what of the beloved? This is the one, the matter I wanted to raise with you. She is flighty. So for women who are intelligent, for women who have substance, for women who are feminists, there is a question of, do we identify with this flighty person? Are we going to really subscribe to the idea of, to the stereotype of women as being basically unable to make up their minds? As Pope says in The Century to Come, we're in 1700, he says, he actually puts in the mouth of his friend Martha Blunt, the line, most women have no characters at all, by which he means they're in the wind. Their souls are just changeable, forever changeable. La donna immobile, sings the Duke in Rigoletto. Woman is, what should we say, mobile in Italian means kind of flexible. And this great aria has sung its way into our hearts now for a very long time. So, is this a male fantasy? Is Millamant a male fantasy? She's very difficult to pin down. She mocks her would-be lovers. She's brilliantly witty. But what I want you to consider is, what armament does she have? What weaponry does she have to exist in a male-dominant world, other than her refusal to surrender? So I'm going to suggest to you, and I want you to consider it in reading, and consider it in reading many other women in literature, that there's no job they could do. They can't, like Congreve, become mistress of the hansom cab. They can't get a government post. They can't get any post at all. So to retain their power, and everybody should be able to retain their power, they are very, very difficult to pin down, very clever, very funny, very elusive. And this elusiveness becomes a male stereotype of women. They're elusive, they're difficult, they're kind of mindless because they don't commit. Well, they don't commit because once they've committed, there's really nothing left. Whereas for the man, once he commits and his beloved commits, he has his life away from the home. He comes home at the end of a working day and says, where's my armchair? Where's my cocktail? So the question is, what else could Millamant, a bright, smart, clever, enchanting woman, be other than that will-o'-the-wisp that men complain of? Refusing to be pinned down, changing her mind, changeable, fickle. And that's what Hamlet, already 100 years before, had concluded about women when he came home from university to find his mother had married his uncle. And it was a case of his mother, who had been a symbol of fixity, permanent, as all mothers and ideally all fathers should be in the most perfect of homes, in the most happy of hearts, forever there, forever stable, always go home and there they will be. But Hamlet comes home and there they are not. And to his horror, his mother is canoodling in public with his uncle. What is she doing? She's done this merely to remain a queen. She should be in mourning for her husband, Hamlet's father, Hamlet Senior, a wonderful man who can't just be thrown off like an old coat, but apparently he can. What does that say of womanhood? Frailty, says Hamlet. Thy name is woman. So he's saying, look up frailty in the dictionary, and frail in those days meant promiscuous, changeable. Frailty, thy name is woman. Look it up in the dictionary. You've got a picture of Gertrude, Hamlet's mother, is what appears. Frailty? Gertrude. So this shock to Hamlet rules his life and brings about the bloodbath that we witness in that play. He doesn't trust any woman anymore. His beloved, Ophelia, cannot be treated as somebody reliable. Indeed, she appears to be a spy for her father. And that's not a paranoid vision. She actually is. And so through Hamlet, we already have a man wrestling with this idea of women who can't make up their minds, women who have no character at all. Yet there is Millamant standing right in the way of this traffic and saying, "Say that again?" And her brilliancy, her wit, her guarantee of superintelligence, a match for the Mirabelles of the world any day, is also a message to women and a message to us not to trust this stereotype of beautiful, ineffectual, difficult women, but to think about it seriously. Think about how men would be if their options in life were taken away. And the best they could hope for would be to be a consort. That's what women have been offered through many centuries, going back maybe to an earlier type of society, perhaps several thousand years ago, where women were honored, where they kept their secrets. As certainly a scholar like Robert Graves believes that they kept the secret of birth itself, that it was the priestess. We had a goddess, not a god. We had gods, but we had a supreme goddess, and we had priestesses of the goddess, and they got together and kept the secret, which was that the orgies occurring at night in the cave, in the model of this Bronze Age world that engendered pregnancy, were the source of pregnancy. They kept that secret. Men, from the men's point of view, who didn't understand it, they had the orgy, and then some months later, oh, look, she's pregnant. I wonder how did that happen? And the priestesses kept close watch on the understanding that men lacked of how one thing led to another. So they had a life of power, which they wielded more or less humanely, just as men have wielded their power more and most often less humanely, leaving us with images of women that we should not trust, because they are, in the main, patriarchal fantasies. Now here, Congreve, with his Millamant, stands before us and says, well, look at Millamant. Are you any better than she is? He says to men, why have you kept her in chains? How would you think she should behave to restore some power to his life, to her life? So I want you to consider that. I don't want you to accept the judgment of the 18th century on women in general, which is absurd, although it's still the judgment that is made by a great many men, and perhaps colluded in by a great many women who find their way, their place at the table, by agreeing that, yes, men are all powerful and women are just pretty ornaments, although they actually know better. And in the history of the West, many women have ruled their husbands, even if their husbands apparently rule the country, never mind the household. They have found ways to insinuate themselves into the power that they naturally merit through their genius, through their intelligence, through all the qualities that a ruler should actually have. This does not apply to every woman, as it does not apply to every man, but it seems as if for centuries now the men have eliminated, kept at bay the possibility of the insurgence of women, at least as good as themselves. So consider Millamant as a strategic player, not as a woman captured by her own stereotype. And I wish you well of the same thought in life. Be well, my dears. Bye-bye now.